Welcome everybody to another great episode of Sports, Movies, and Fun. We are in episode, I believe, 6. We're moving right along here.
Chugging.
Yeah, we're doing great. We need to get Glory Road up. Other than that, it's been really good. We discussed we did 42. We've done
Remember the Titans.
Remember the Titans, League of Their Own.
Major League.
Major League, which was really fun. And today we're going to be discussing Hoosiers.
There we go.
So this movie was loosely based, as we talked about earlier. Loosely is probably the best term for it. It's basically the only probably thing that's kind of true about this whole movie is that it's about an Indiana State team that was very small, and as far as population goes, and they took that little small population team with whenever you have a small amount of population at your school, the talent is thinner, the people that go out for the team is thinner, you don't have so many other players to choose from. So it's a real tight pull, and you have to do almost everything right to be a winner. Well, they were winners. They won the whole Indiana State Championship in 1954. And if you know anything about Indiana basketball, it's sort of like Texas football. It's all about the basketball. Any of those Midwest kind of teams are all, very focused on their basketball. They love their basketball. They travel to games. They close shop. They do everything to support these high school basketball players. A little bit about the movie. Rated PG, directed by David Anspaugh, who also did Rudy, and written by Angelo Pizzo, who also did Rudy, and Alvin Sargent. Now, when you have David Anspaugh and Angelo Pizzo, they did the Hoosiers and Rudy. That was basically all they did. They did a couple others, but not really anything important. Alvin Sargent, on the other hand, did movies like What About Bob? Spider-Man 2, Spider-Man 3. So he went on to have a better career. Runtime, length of movie, 116 minutes. When did it open? Well, it opened in November 14th, 1986 in limited areas. This was not a widespread film. In fact, yeah. Gene Hackman was like, this movie's basically dog, and it's not going to do anything. It's probably going to ruin my career. But on the other hand, it kind of helped. So costs was not a big budget, obviously $6 million, but the return on investment was $28.6 million. So they got pretty good investment considering limited release. It was filmed in several locations in Indiana in 1985 and nominated for 2 Oscars. Of course, Dennis Hopper, if you've seen the film, was just fantastic. And best music by Jerry Goldsmith. So that's basically all about that sort of behind the scenes kind of thing with the movie. What was, I have one question, couple questions for you, Neiko. What was your favorite character in this movie, or what character did you sort of bond with?
So I definitely like Scooter, just seeing his story. So when you got to choose him, and then when you chose the scenes as well, we'll get to later. So you chose a couple of my favorite things. I was like, all right, it's time to get a little deeper, kind of revisit some of these other scenes. But yeah, so seeing Scooter's rise and just doing some research and seeing how hard he pushed himself on the movie. He was actually himself recovering, and he was I forgot, it was like a year or so sober, or maybe more, or maybe less. It didn't say amount of time, but he was, questioning if he wanted to do the role, and he, did it in such a great job. But he also, he had a trick from, I forgot which the movie was called. I think it was something Dean, is one of the actors, Dean. But anyway, he had a trick for him in a movie they were in together where he would just spin around for 30 seconds, and that would get him drunk. Right, I'd give him the spins, I'd give him inebriated. So for this film, he really, would do that. He would go in and spin. So that's why you'd see him so teetering. And when I saw, I was like, man, this is really good acting. And I was like, not only is that good acting, that's legit. Like his equilibrium's all messed up, not because of the alcohol, but because of what's happening.
Right.
And something we'll get into later too is a scene that he had a really important part in cutting out one of his scenes from the film. And so if you could remind me about that later, I'll kind of bring it up later as we go along. I don't want to spoil too much of it or ruin any of our scenes. But yeah, he just doing a little bit of extra research on him because he's definitely my favorite character. Getting to see what he brought to the film as an actor and for the character he played and portrayed throughout the movie was definitely my favorite.
Yeah, I think he was probably the only character in the movie that had a major character arc.
Yes.
And really, Gene Hackman didn't really have a character arc. Most of of course, the players, you see sort of slightly character arcs, but they're minor roles, so character arcs aren't going to really be essential. But as far as just a huge character arc, he established that so well in the movie.
Absolutely. And, like you said, it's kind of funny that, Coach didn't really change much, even when he's going up to when he's going up to talk about, whether or not they should bring him back as a coach when they're doing the vote. So I apologize for nothing. Right. So it's kind of funny. It's like there's a chance there for like a little bit of a character arc, a little bit of a change. We're like, nope. And I believe it was Pizzo, right? When Pizzo was writing it, he was thinking about, Bobby Knight. And he was like, hey, can you imagine if Bobby, because I don't know if Bobby Knight did ever have any like physical education. He's like, can you imagine if Bobby Knight had punched a kid, punched a player during the game? What would what would happen? What would be the kind of ripple effects that would, kind of lead him down that way? And so when they do this film and they kind of think of that with Coach and they have, and then it's crazy too, because you would think that the town of Indiana would do like some type of, research. They see later on in the movie where they're able to find a little article on him and why he was, fired from the school in upstate New York and such. But it was just I think that was the main thing the director and the writers really wanted to focus on was like keeping Coach the same. Like no way do they want to change, Hackman from his, his acting way. They want to keep everything the same way. And it was definitely reflective of that town. I don't know if you noticed, but the town was all white, right? All the games, all the fans, all the players, all the students, everything white. The town, everything white. And I was just, it's a tiny little town. And I think it was in southwest Indiana. I forgot where.
I'm not for sure, but when he said southeast, it kind of rang a bell.
That was the southeast, yeah. That was the southeast, where they kind of loosely based it off the Milan team. But anyway, it was just I had a lot of fun watching the movie, but it was funny to me, not fun, I guess, but it was crazy to see that there was no black players until the championship game in this film. That's something that stood out to me. Like when we watched the Glory Road, we're watching right, it's a total different ball game, and the way that Coach is coaching them, for this team, they're doing like the 4 passes before you could even shoot. And that's totally, taken out of the whole college playbook of Bobby Knight. Right? It's, okay, you have to distribute the ball, pass it around. Whereas Glory Road, like when they have to do any passes, like I have to look this nerdy, and they're doing everything all awkward like that. But this one, the coaches require they look like that. And something to also look at, Mike, is that these characters that played basketball, I think 7 out of 8 of them were from Indiana. Only Scooter's son was from out of state. So they were all Indiana actual players, but they had to retrain themselves to play like 1950s players. So they got a lot of tape and they were doing a lot of research, and they spent about 2 months, like maybe the 400, 500 players that tried out for this film. And they had to play no hand checking, no crazy, deep shots, too deep or anything. They totally changed the game and just like had to practice basketball in a whole other way. So they interviewed some of the actors, that played the game. They're like, dude, it was really tough to switch from, playing modern day basketball, and I guess modern up in the 80s, right? But modern type basketball in the 80s, and then switching it back to go back 30 years and having to retrain yourself for 2 months to look, like you actually are being, part of the film. Because sometimes the films look so obvious these guys are totally outdated or just like a different era. But I thought they did a really good job, and I'm curious, to think what you thought as well, because I thought the basketball games were quite well done.
Yeah, and in fact, what they did was they sort of did what they did with Miracle. Miracle, with the movie about the 1984 hockey team, where those players, the people that were casted for those roles, not only they looked for the ones that look like them, but also they could play hockey. Well, in this, they sort of did the same thing. They were more concentrated on how realistic the basketball was going to look, that they looked for people who could play the game. And that's how they got, and I'm going to butcher his name, Maris Balanis, I believe his name is, who played Jimmy Chitwood, who's one of your favorite characters. And they found him playing in a gym. So it was they're very much focused on actors and more on athletes than they were actually actors.
Yeah. And now that you bring up Jimmy, he's a really fun character to watch as well, Mike, because I thought he also represented Indiana quite well. Not that I know much about Indiana, but from what from what we've been told and taught, just seeing like the kind of quiet, stoic kind of personality and just sitting there shooting. Coaches out there talking to him.
Jimmy, how did you see in class today? Any reason you want to tell me about it? In the 10 years that I coached, I never met anybody who wanted to win as badly as I did. I'd do anything I had to do to increase my advantage. Anybody who tried to block the pursuit of that advantage, I just push them out of the way. Didn't matter who they were or what they were doing there. But that was then. You had a special talent, a gift. Not the schools, not the townspeople, not the teams, not Myra Fleener's, not mine. It's yours to do with what you choose. Because that's what I believe. I can tell you this. I don't care if you play on the team or not.
But it just showed, that his calming mechanism, his ability to kind of just like sit there. Okay, yes, he might have lost his coach from last year, who was a father figure to him, but he still has the basketball, he still has the hoop, so he still has a little piece of that coach left in him. And we see Jimmy throughout the movie kind of quietly, watch coaches in the first practice kick a kid out, kick everybody out of practice as well. The town's, the welcoming committee that I joked with you about, all the guys is like ready to, kick his, behind just for, thinking of not running zone defense. We're way too small. We can't run zone defense here at the barbershop scene. So anyway, before I get too much into that, Mike, what did you think about the whole barbershop scene and the whole the way Jimmy, swayed everything? But it just seemed to me like there was a very like small town where everybody knew everything, and there was just like way too hands-on for a former college coach to come back in and be like, oh my God, especially with the Bobby Knight personality that they had written.
Right, and then not only that, what you're looking at as far as Dale or Norm, depending on what character is calling him what, but his character Norman Dale. So he's a guy that college basketball coach, won a small college championship in Ithaca, and then had this situation where he hits the kid and is banned for life, and then decides to go into the Navy and becomes a chief petty officer, which at that time, 1950s or whatever it was the highest ranked member of the U.S. Navy. So here he is. He puts his time in the Navy and comes in and decides to take this job all the way in Indiana. So he goes from New York to Indiana. And in the beginning, you could kind of see him travel, making different stops and that kind of stuff. And he ends up, and I think he has his own way of doing things. This is the way I do it. This is how I won. This is what we're going to do. He arrives in Indiana from New York, and they're like, as you were saying, the welcome committee was sort of like how we saw in what was it? Not Friday Night Lights. Was it Friday Night? Yeah, Friday Night Lights, where you got to do this.
Remember the Titans.
Remember the Titans. Thank you. You got to do it this way. You got to do it that way, and have it this way. And they're like, okay, you got to run zone. And which was interesting was the guy who played Ed Harris in Major League, the movie we just reviewed, is now in this movie, and I'm like, oh, Ed Harris. But anyways. He's the one that Hackman takes over for, and he's like, you got to run zone, and he's like, no, we got to do it my way.
The last time you coached was 12 years ago?
Yes, that's right.
Where?
That was in Ithaca, New York.
What you been doing since?
Well, I've been in the Navy for the last 10 years. I was a chief petty officer.
Well, looks like you're going to need a little help. Since I've been running practices the last couple of weeks, I'll help you out till you get your feet wet.
This town doesn't like change much. So we thought we'd get together here tonight and show you how we do things here.
We trust that you're a fine, upstanding, God-fearing man with Christian morals and principles who will set an example and a standard of leadership for our boys. Tell me, do you believe in man-to-man or zone defense?
Zone defense is all we played in the past, and it's the only thing that'll work this year.
That's right, George.
That's it. Ruling for us. Our boys are too small, but remember, we were 15-10 last year, and we got all our boys back but one.
Listen, I ain't interested in talking defense here, and I don't have a hair of a notion why we hired someone that's been in the water for the last 10 years. Now, the main point here is we don't get Jimmy Chitwood back playing ball, we don't have a prayer. That's right. He switches over to Terhune, we're in big trouble.
Lister's right, Coach. Jimmy's the jack to their...
Gentlemen, it's been real nice talking to you. Good night.
Yeah, and it's just, it's good to see, because when you have these coaches brought in for change, or you have these coaches brought in to bring you and elevate you to the next level, yes, the Warriors had a great coach before they had Steve Kerr, but getting Steve Kerr brought them to the next level, right? When you start looking at sports that way, is when you have a guy brought in to really bring you to that the upper echelon of what you're playing, you really got to buy into that system, because if you only, if you half-ass it and you only buy into half the system, your team's not going to be that solid, not unified. It's going to be an ugly product that you put on the field or on the court. So when the way he just shuts it down, thank you, gentlemen, for your time, and have a great night, and just walks out, right? Just there's 40 people out there made their whole day, made a whole point of waiting there the whole time for him. He listens for 2 minutes, and I'm out. It's like George Costanza leaving on a high note, and I'm done. But it was definitely like I said, when the Bobby Knight character, when you think about that, I would expect nothing less. No, I wouldn't expect there's no suggestion boxes, right? When I coach our kids during camp, we have a joke that the trash can is a suggestion box. It's you want us to play a song for you? Go put it in that metal can outside. Right? We tell them that. And I kind of feel like that's we joke about it, but back in the day, I'm sure that was much more the staunch, hey, don't approach me, don't talk to me. Or they even have a part in the movie where the guy, one of the fathers and one of the town's dudes comes in the middle of the halftime talk, right? They're getting their butts kicked in the first game, and he comes in there what are you doing? And he just loses it, right? And we have that a lot. We have these parents where we're talking to these kids after a really rough baseball game, and these parents will come in and start giving their advice. I'm like, oh, hey, thank you for that, but maybe the ride home would have been the right time for that. So when you look at it and you see these parents, or these people that are much older and not the actual players in the game getting so crazy, what does that make you think? Because before you answer that question, there's a quote that just came out where some major league scouts, they're asked about, if I could tell who your parent is just by how much they yell during the game and how much they scream at the other, coaches or umpires, you're not going to be on my team. I'm not going to put a high grade on you. I'm not going to send you, to a D1 program or anything like that. So think right, and that's crazy, but that's kind of a true thing, because you have these travel ball parents in softball and baseball that are insanely intense, and these 10 and 12-year-olds are crying on the field because their parents are screaming at them because they drove 4 hours to play a tournament for 2 games. So when you see parents and you see people that are played 40 years ago on the team, but now they still they run a barbershop and they still want to be involved in it, what do you think that does to the coach, to the players, to the community? I mean, I definitely see it as having a little bit of a negative impact, even though it continues the lore and the tradition. But when do you think it would need to stop? Where would you draw the line as the coach?
It's kind of hard to draw a line, especially if in a live game. And you're in the middle of the game and you hear this parent just totally trashing on their kid, or even if they're not trashing on the kid, they're yelling at him. Oh, when that pitcher throws that curve, you need to really take a step back into the batter's box, or he's dominating you throwing the fastball. You need to choke up a little bit or whatever. Just hammering them. You can't really do anything in the middle of the game, of course. I mean, it probably as much as you'd like to just say, okay, timeout. Hey, I want this guy out of here, Now, there is a line of crossing, if he's dropping F-bombs and he's totally unruly, you want to teach these kids the right way, especially as a coach. And that's what he was trying to do in the very beginning was, okay, you guys can shoot greatly, but you have no fundamentals whatsoever. and we need to work on fundamentals before we can actually transfer from those fundamentals to actually shooting. That's how you win basketball games. So I think you just try to teach a kid as much as possible and the best of your ability, and just hope fully that the parent behind there who can't control himself because it's more about him and maybe his days in baseball and wanting his kid to be better than him or whatever it is, then actually the child, it's not really much you can do about it, but hopefully just try to put as much barrier in between.
Yeah, absolutely. And you brought up a good point about the whole fundamental thing. When you were watching the film, right, this basketball movie, and we see coach just like, okay, get the folding chairs out, and these boys are just dribbling, right? They a lot of passing drills, no shooting. And, these kids are saying, hey, this isn't fun. Like, oh, that's cool. Like, my practice isn't designed for you to have fun. Right. It's for you to learn so that when you're in the game and you're dribbling, you don't have to look down and watch where you're dribbling. You can dribble with your head up and you can see, right? You can shoot easily because it's been practiced so many times. You do all these different things that you do, separately, but you have to build up to it. And it made me kind of think of myself because I was always obsessed with tee work. I still am. So when I, before I even hit off the baseball machine that we have at my work, I do about 20, 30 minutes of tee swings. And I'm not even doing like full swings. I'm doing, open swings, closed swings, one-handed drills, high tee, walk through drills, step back drill. I'm doing all these crazy things before I even think about swinging normal. And this, for me, that's just the way it works, right? Yesterday, we were celebrating my girlfriend's birthday, and I was a little bit late because, I really forced myself to do 40 minutes of tee, and I only got 15 minutes of hitting off the machine. I wanted to hit for a little bit longer, so I go like 17 minutes. But for me, I'm just like, no, I have to get my tee work in. And for the coach, to come in with his college, type program and to bring it into these high schoolers, I think there's going to be shooting and doing layups all day. He's like, no. We're going to break it down. We're going to do the nitty gritty. We're going to do the really boring fundamental things till they become just absolutely second nature. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to look at it. It's done. Your body knows what to do, and it kind of calluses the body and the reactions, right? So when you're put in the situations in the game, you're able to react, in a proper way to hopefully win a state championship.
Yeah, and that's what it's exactly about. Is fundamentals aren't fun. It's like studying for a test.
Yeah.
It's dry. It's hard. It's difficult. You don't want to do it. But by studying for the test, it's only going to get you to be a better player. You can't walk in and take the test and think that you're going to fly through it. So even the best of the best, what are they doing? They're doing fundamentals each and every day. You might not think they are, but they are. They're working on it. They're working on their swinging. They're working on shortening their stance. They're working on whatever they need to do to be a better baseball player. Because guess what? That pitcher knows exactly what your flaws are, and your job as a professional or as any ball player is to say, okay, well, now you know what my flaws are. I need to correct those flaws so that I can dominate whatever you're going to throw at me. And it's a back and forth game. And the more you work on those fundamentals, the better are you going to be in the long run.
Absolutely. And now, Mike, we talk about kind of battling our demons and getting better. When you look at the character of Shooter, what are you thinking here? I talked a little bit about why I loved him so much, but I know he was a guy you wanted to talk about. So, are there any other things you wanted to add about him? Because he's a guy I see too. He loves basketball. And, you start talking to him. He's the fundamentals. Boom. Okay, that's where see the light in his eyes start to shine. He's okay. Now I can talk about this and that, and it's just his comfort. That's his place. He's in rehab, and that's his place, is talking about basketball. I love basketball. I love you, coach. I'm so proud of you, right? So when you look at his character and you look at just like thinking of basketball and fundamentals and the love of just learning the game, is that something that kind of helped you really enjoy this character in a great movie?
Yeah, absolutely. And you could see without Shooter, I don't think they even come close to winning this championship. Because, as Dale is a good inspirational coach, he really struggled understanding the fundamentals. It was always like not really understanding the fundamentals, but how to transfer the fundamentals to being how to play the game. It was like he did all the studying for the test, but when it comes to the test, he doesn't do well when it comes to the test.
Choppy.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I think that was the rock that he needed, that Dale needed, was Shooter. And Shooter understood how to transfer the fundamentals into the playing style and understood all the little nuances in the court and how these teams were playing and all these different things, just that love of the game. And it was great just to see him going from this meek, drunk man to, being put on the spot. Okay, now you got to coach. And he's like, I can't do that. There's no way. And then he fails. And then the second time when Hackman's like, throw me out of the game. I want you to throw me out of the game. And the referee's like, you're out of here. and then it's up to him. And his son says, you just talk to him a little bit, and his eyes and his just everything. And he's like, okay, we're gonna do paint, paint the fence, and run this, and and all this stuff, picket fence, and just watch him come alive was amazing.
And when you look at his battle with alcohol throughout the movie, I thought they did a good job as well. Shakes. They clearly, whether it was the director or his author's personal experience, before this film, before this character, with his battles with alcohol, and also like the withdrawal symptoms, right? You see these people getting really sweaty, clammy, and the shakes, the things that you hear about, but he was able to portray it and show it in such a great way. Obviously, he said it earned an Oscar nomination. So, something I want, I talked about earlier, I wanted to bring up. He is the one that is responsible for cutting the part where he leaves rehab to watch the state championship. For those that don't know, he's watching, listening to the state championship in rehab. He said that for how far his character had gone along in his sobriety, and for him to take that seriously and to take the role seriously, he didn't want him to leave rehab. Because he said that, if you had left rehab that quickly, it would have been like, well, it was like a 2-3 day fix, but now he's just up and at it. So they wanted, he made sure, Hopper made sure, he's like, okay, hey, I'm gonna get that eliminated. I don't want that part. And he begged the directors, the writers and everybody, and they ended up admitting it was a great note from an actor, because they wanted to add it. I think they had an extra like hour plus of screen, a bunch of different things, like the love scenes and all these extra scenes, but they just wanted to condense. And it's funny that one of the scenes that they really wanted to leave on there had to be dropped because of the person acting was like, no, from my personal experience and real life experience with sobriety, this needs to be taken seriously.
Yeah, and I'm glad he did, because that really would have made that would have made like the whole, because by him leaving the hospital, he would have probably found his way to an alcohol bottle. Yeah. And after his son comes to him and promises him, and they have that, and he's turned the corner, he doesn't have the shakes anymore, alcoholism, and they did exactly what someone going through alcohol would be to go from one stage to the other to getting better. And they hit that perfectly. And for him to leave would have been just ruin that whole thing, the whole scene with him and his son and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I'm so glad that they cut that out, because it would have been really bad.
Yeah, exactly. And it kind of gives, a more serious note to the way he's attacking his sobriety, just the way he attacked his game when, before he was, taken up with the bottle. Talking about characters and other things being cut out, Mike, there's a lot of love scenes cut out of this. Perhaps maybe that's why you and I liked it, because sometimes these love scenes are really corny and cheesy. But also on the flip side, sometimes there's not enough, right? Sometimes they don't really get enough into the personal relationship to show this person besides their sports life, right? So many times we watch these sports movies and we have these coaches or main characters, or they show you just their sports life and a tiny little, fragment of their life off the field or off the court. So what were your thoughts on
I think I liked it. I know that Barbara Hershey's character is sort of what you want to talk about, so I'll leave her out of it. But I thought that it was too much. I think that but they kind of also needed to establish her character. I just think it was more, I would rather have had that relationship with the team, where you really didn't get Gene Hackman's character with the team and how he felt about the team. It was almost like an outsider. Like, he was a coach, and the only really passion he ever showed with the team was when he told them that he loved them. Yeah. But outside of that, there really wasn't any cohesiveness at all. And I think a lot of that went from the team to Barbara Hershey's character, where you see it step by step by step by step, and finally they get there. But I think that took way too long. I would have rather taken those minutes and had him bond with the team rather than with Barbara Hershey.
Yeah, and I felt that, when looking at her character, she had some important parts, but like you said, perhaps they didn't develop or kind of, give her the proper, introduction or the kind of role. Because, the way you meet her is on the school steps, and it's just a pretty teacher and the main character. So, like, obviously in our minds, it's kind of obvious, like, oh, I wonder what's going to happen at the end of the movie. Like, I'm sure there's going to be a kissing scene. Right. So, right, it's just kind of like a little too cliche. But, she did come on pretty, guns a-blazing with fire,
She did.
stay away from Jimmy, talking about, like, I want him out of here.
Yeah.
And just, he had just better things to offer. And that's kind of a neat perspective to have, because when so many people treat, like Jimmy was, I treat you like a king in you're, a big fish in a small pond. Sometimes when you got to go to a bigger pond, it's a lot tougher to acclimate and deal with. I went from a tiny little middle school to a really, really tough high school, right? And I was the man at my middle school. But when I got to my high school, I'm like, oh, there's 300 other boys that were the dude at their school and 300 other females that are, the woman at their school. It's just like, oh my God, like, you just don't realize that sometimes it just keeps going. But if you stay in your little pond, you'll never know. So I think what she was trying to do was help Jimmy, whether it was through education, getting him a scholarship for academics, just trying to get him away and learning things. Because they do go and show that, she got a graduate degree, but ended up coming back to farm. Her father passed away, mother was sick. So it was kind of like that was her wrench, you get the thing that got thrown in the way of her pursuit of leaving that town. So her wanting better for the boy that she takes care of was quite an important part of the movie to me, to show that, not only was he prized for his physical talents and his, athletic ability and what he could do with the basketball, but he also was prized for his brain, because so many athletes aren't told that they're smart enough, they aren't kind of hyped up enough on the whole school aspect of life, because a lot of us aren't going to make it to the big leagues, right? But some of us will make it enough we'll get a little bit of a scholarship, to a small school, and you get education there for a discount. And that's just such a big thing. And I think that's what she was kind of going for. And it seems like in the movie that her mama bear, taking care of him kind of gets in the way, where she's not so nice at first to coach, but then she kind of softens up and, smooths the edges after her mother kind of gets more involved and, kind of helps involve the coach more in their lives.
Now, with her character, and we touched on it a little bit about where they decide to vote on whether they're going to keep Gene Hackman's character in or out as far as the head coach, and of course the what makes everything change, because they vote him out, but Jimmy Chitwood comes in and says, hey, there's only one coach I'm playing for. And I thought that was really good, because Jimmy Chitwood, as you mentioned, that conservative ball player, and he's not gonna play for anybody that doesn't take things as seriously as he does. But when they vote him out and he says, okay, I'm not going to apologize, what do you think as far as Barbara Hershey's character? Do you think that would have been like the end for her? Like, I'm sort of into this dude, but now he's not going to apologize for hitting a kid, and so I'm out of it? Or what do you think her reaction would have been as far as in real life, when he doesn't take responsibility for doing such?
Yeah, I mean, if somebody hit a minor, or they hit somebody that they're supposed to be taking care of or coaching against, and then someone else is coaching and taking care of them, and not apologizing for that, I would have a tough time standing behind that person and giving them my full support. But obviously, this is a movie that's a little bit different. They wanted to give us some controversy. They want to give us a little bit of suspense, right? As much as a PG movie can give. So when she gets up to the podium, she's like, I think, and she has like she has the article in her hand, and then she says, I think we should give him another chance, with tears in her eyes, right? Very passionate. She's a well-known person. She was the acting principal, I believe, once the principal got sick.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. So she was a bigger, she's a big important factor in the whole school and the whole town and such. So she had a big voice. And obviously with Jimmy, that was kind of her, he looks, not looks up to her, but definitely looks to her for protection and for help. So for her to give, her votes to coach and then also have Jimmy there, I think that really, kind of changed the movie. But like you mentioned, it's just not very believable that somebody of her, morals and somebody of her virtues would be able to be like, yes, he hit a kid, he didn't apologize for it, let's give him another chance with a boy that I so, our children that I so dearly care for.
Right, exactly. And then she tries to give him another chance after that, where they're walking, they're taking a walk.
Like to take a walk? That's pretty.
Yeah, and late spring, those fields. So green, it looks like Ireland.
Huh.
How I always imagined Ireland would look. I've seen it in pictures, postcards.
Nice. Do you have to go to Deer Lick some evening, take in a movie?
Norman Dale, coach of the Ithaca Warriors, was suspended.
I can't really explain that. It's been a number of years, and it still kind of goes around in my head. I slow it down. Sometimes I really think that I can stop my fist from hitting a boy's jaw. 1 second, everything I'd worked for, it's just all finished. Funny thing, too, he's the best kid that ever played for me. Tough, and stubborn, and willful.
Sounds like someone I know.
Imagine kissing you ever since I first saw you. I'm just tired of imagining.
It's been a long time.
For me, too.
And then they go for a walk, and she asks him again, hey, what about this situation? And he's like, I don't know. I don't know what went over me. I just hit the kid. And I'm just like, I just don't see her falling in love with this guy.
Yeah, and that's what makes it hard to believe, right? Because he talks about, it was a 1 second that messed up my whole life. It's like, yeah, but leading up to that second, there's a history of this coach or Bobby Knight, right, being very, kind of crazy and all over the place and very throwing stuff and demonstrative. So, you got to be careful. And when people like that are kind of just giving you a BS kind of, it happened in a split second. Things got heated.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, that's why you stole your brother's toy when you were 7 years old. That's a good excuse.
Right.
Hitting somebody when you're a college coach, like that's just, you know what I mean? Like, that's a much different thing. So some of these excuses, but I think it did show the character of Coach, and it kind of, it kept him in that, staunch, like, I'm going to stay in my ways kind of coach. It just is not so believable for the romance story. It's not so believable that, she would fall in love for him and that she would, with him and just continue to be like, oh, I'm going to throw all my support behind you, even though I know of these things you've done. And, I've seen that you're kind of, screaming at the kids, getting all over it, getting ejected. And, there was a fight. The kids throw a punch to protect him. Another kid gets thrown in the glass and his back gets all cut up and everything. So, it definitely wasn't setting the best or most perfect example for the children. So I think that was something that needs to be looked at as well. Now, Mike, one of my favorite things, I was just about to talk about it, so I want to give it to you before I ruin it. When we talk about measuring the free throw line and we talk about measuring the basketball hoop, can you talk about that scene? Because I feel like in so many sports and so many situations in life, this could be put in there and really give a lot of people peace of mind and kind of remind us that where our home base is and where we came from and how a lot of things are similar, which is a lot of different surroundings, but inside of it we have a very similar thing.
Yeah, it's really interesting because as you mentioned, they're in this small town of Indiana. It's a small as far as population as even the school goes. It's really small. All those kind of things. That there's just not a lot of funding, and not only that, but you're in Indiana where everything is farm. You're not used to big structures. You're just used to land, and now they go and travel for the state championship, and they go into this huge arena, and they're just completely blown away. Even Gene Hackman is like, this place is big, he was even impressed by it. But what was really cool, as you're stating, that you measure the free throw line, and guess what? It's the same as you are at home. You measured how high the basketball hoop, guess what? It's the same as home. So no matter how big your bubble is, it's about your inner core. And as long as you can anchor yourself to your inner core, then everything else, regardless of how big things are not really that big at all.
Buddy, hold this into the backboard. What is it? 15 feet. 15 feet. Strap, put Ollie on your shoulders. Measure this from the rim. Buddy? How far? 10 feet. 10 feet. I think you'll find it's exact same measurements as our gym back in Hickory.
Yeah, and I forgot which movie or TV show I was watching. It's got to be like 5-10 years ago. But there's a scene where there's a Little League game. I think is a Little League game, and a boy's getting blown away, right? And he's nervous. He's a really good pitcher, and he's on the deck. And his dad lets him say, "Hey, already puts on his pants one leg at a time." I forgot what movie that is, but anyway, it goes to show that, like, okay, yes, these guys may be intimidating, right? When they're talking to coach, like, hey, in the championship, the front line is 6'4" and 6'5". How are you guys going to rebound against that? Right. And he's just talking about, like, my guys have never seen a 2-story building, right? Like, just leaving these little flat town is going to be insane for them. Like, I'm more concerned about that than I am about the players that they're playing against. So I don't know. It was just it was a lot of fun to watch that. And just like I said, just seeing coach go there and just break it down. And the kids kind of like laugh, like, okay, deep breath, sigh of relief. Like, yes, it's a 15,000 person arena, right? It's gonna be the most people they've ever played in front of. But at the same time, the hoop and the free throw line, the dimensions are all exactly the same as their tiny little place they've been playing in their whole lives in Indiana.
Yeah, and that scene, when I first saw the movie and I first saw that scene, it was one of the scenes that and all the movies I've seen that I've taken with me as far as a life lesson. So every time I see that, that's like every time I see the movie, that's the scene I'm looking for to watch, especially when I've seen it with someone that hasn't seen it before. It's just like, I can't wait till you get this scene because it's so important. But yeah, I love it. It's definitely one of the better scenes. Let's talk about another very important character, Jimmy Chitwood. What did you think as far as him? I mean, the dude had like maybe 5 lines in the whole movie, but was like the biggest star of the whole movie. What did you think of him, or maybe some of the other basketball players?
Yeah, no, with Jimmy, it's funny to see because he's so quiet, right? We're used to so many, superstar players in any sport just to be loud and to be a leader with their words and their actions, right? It seems like he just kind of leads with his shooting. I mean, he does the right thing. He shoots the ball the right way, and he plays defense the right way. And that's how he's going to lead, by example. It definitely was funny to me that, yeah, like you said, he had like 4 or 5 lines, and he's supposed to be one of the biggest, not the biggest focal point of the movie, but for non-adults, he's going to be the biggest, right, focal point of the movie, the non-adult characters. So it was fun to watch that and watch him just kind of like, sit there peering in at the watching the first practice, and then just kind of silently coming up in the meeting where they're voting whether coach should be in or out. Just kind of hands his basketball to the small Ollie, right? Just like hands him the basketball and walks in quietly. And just like everything he did was just so quiet. It was almost eerie, but obviously that he was in mourning. That he's been going through a lot, and he doesn't have the best support system at home. So his lack of cheeriness is obvious. I think the way that he kind of galvanized and led the other players with his examples and with his good shooting definitely helped. But he wasn't much of a leader in words, right? He didn't really have much of a let's go, or he didn't punch the coach in protection. He didn't, get thrown into the glass. Even when they had the fight, they show him kind of on the side holding his ankle. So it showed to me that it was like Jimmy knew that he had to focus a lot on himself. I think he had lost both of his parents, correct? And then also, right? So his caretaking situation also wasn't the best. So he had, I think, a lot of things in life that led him to protect number one, which is himself. But it showed in the film that, he wasn't the loudest, most demonstrative leader. But that was kind of nice to see because we're so used to that now. It's kind of refreshing to see and just watch a guy play instead of listen to him play.
And I thought the end where they need the one shot to win the game, and the one person who does speak up is Jimmy. After I forget who it was, but they're like, "We want to run it through you," and he's like, "I ain't taking that shot."
Yeah, right.
And then Jimmy was like, "Yeah, I'll take it, and we're gonna win."
Listen up. Here's what we're gonna do. Jimmy, they're gonna be expecting you to take the last shot. We're gonna use you as a decoy. Buddy, you get the ball, give it to Merle on the picket fence. He's gonna take the last shot. All right, let's go. What's the matter with you guys? What's the matter with you?
I'll make it.
All right. Buddy, get the ball to Jimmy, top of the key. Lester, just spread the floor. Let's go.
And it was like the first time he ever spoke that was in some kind of role of leadership.
Yeah, exactly. And it was cool to see because he just knew that was going to happen. And now, Mike, a little funny tidbit on that shot. The actual shot where it was based off of that shot he hit, like from the top of the key, that was the actual shot where the school that they based it off of won their championship from. However, right before that shot, there was no shot clock, so they dribbled the ball out for 4 minutes. They sat there for 4 minutes just dribbling, and then they traded baskets, and then hit the game winner. I think also on top of that, one of the teams they played, I think it was like one of the teams they beat in the section or the regionals or one of that had Oscar Robinson, the Hall of Famer, on that team. Real life. Yeah. So Oscar Robinson was a semi part of the story, kind of loosely based off that school. But yeah, it was just funny to see like that winning shot that Jimmy took was actually shot by the same spot. But before that, since there's no shot clock, they just dribbled the ball out for 4 minutes.
Yeah, actually, and that was sort of the interesting thing too, and I'm glad you touched on that. Was one of the unrealistic moments of sort of Hoosiers was that they sort of didn't use that as far as what would normally have been played. Like you said, they were. That's why passing was so important, was because before they would foul, they would just pass, especially if they had the lead, and just pass the ball around. So you're right. As they were showing with just passing around that 4 minutes, what ended up happening, in fact, with Jimmy Valvano and how NC State won their championship, and they were a major underdog, was Jimmy Valvano, when they were behind, would say, foul this player. And what it did, as we now know, is not only did it stop the clock, which is so essential when you're behind, but also gave them a chance to come back and win, win the game, especially in the tournament. And then, of course, later on, they decided, okay, let's insert a shot clock so that, the game isn't being stopped by players fouling each other, and that gets sloppy as well. So that's basically where sort of the shot clock and stuff came from. But as you mentioned, back then, there was no shot clock.
Yeah, and I think back then I would have been a much better video game player, because when I first started playing basketball video games, I didn't know about the shot clock. And I'm sitting there playing my older cousins, and I'm just like turning it over. And I had to look. I'm like, what are these red numbers blinking? And I was like, aha. Because me playing baseball in such an untimed and slow-paced sport, we don't have the time. Now we do, right? But before, you didn't really have anything for a timer. So for basketball, for me, I'm like 5 seconds. You need to pass it in. You get it over, half court before 8 seconds. You can't hold the ball. It was like all these rules. I was like, oh my God, I was turning over everything before even taking a terrible shot in the 2K game. But you definitely learn a little bit, and I'm definitely glad that they have the shot clock. Speaking of shot clocks, Mike, as we're wrapping up here, are there any other scenes or any other characters, anything you feel that we missed on? I really enjoyed this movie. Usually you and I like to grade the movie. So before we get on to that, is there anything you felt that we, any parting words, any cool little tidbits that, you and I do a lot of research on these movies, but before we do that, is there anything you have?
I think just two players for quick little tidbits. Strap Pearl, the minister child that couldn't leave the couldn't leave the locker room because he was in mid prayer. And
God wants you on the court.
God wants you on the court. And then of course the Ollie and his winning. My wife's like, what is he doing? I don't understand. What the heck is? And I'm like, I wouldn't criticize it so much. Rick Barry, Hall of Famer.
Rick Barry.
Guess what he did? Underhand. And then the Buddy Walker when Gene Hackman tells him, okay, by the end of the game, I want to know what kind of gum he's chewing. And he'd sit down because he fouls out and turns to the coach, Dentine. And so those are the moments that stuck out that we didn't really talk about. How about you? Any moments for yourself?
Yeah, I actually really those moments. Yeah, the gum one was hilarious. Just like seeing them do that. I like the way that Coach got intentionally thrown out. Well, I did it again, right? Yeah. Like he purposely put Shooter, just like totally threw him in the fire. But sometimes that's the best way to learn. Like when I have an assistant coach that's young, sometimes I baby and coddle them too much. And I'm like, dude, like just let the kid coach. Like, I'm coaching 9-year-olds. Like who cares? Like let this guy get in there, right? So sometimes you're just like, hey, you're the pitcher today for the game. The kids are screaming at you. You'll be the umpire, right? And sometimes it's just funny to sit back and watch and be like, all right, I'm cool, taking my foot off the gas a little bit, put on auto drive, and, let somebody else take care of it. So I thought that scene was quite interesting to see because, you see, Shooter sits down the first one, he's all freaking out. And then by the second one, he slowly develops his voice with his son helping him. And then, by the end of the movie, he's like claiming, oh, I helped him. I did all this. He's jumping up and down, telling the nurse, in his rehab facility. It was great to see his spirits, right? Because you don't see him jumping up and down. You saw him stumbling and, falling down throughout the movie. So, just even, yeah, right.
Oh,
so,
I love that. I didn't think about that, but that, yeah, I mean, he went from just being heavy and falling all over the place to light as a feather, jumping around. So I like that. Good call on that one.
Yeah, so just showed the way he was able to semi-control his consumption of the poison that seemed to have been, consuming him and embarrassing his family and kind of hindering his chances at, what seemed to be a pretty good coaching career based off his knowledge of basketball and the little town's, ability to throw anybody in there if they don't have a coach.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Who do we go next? We don't even have players, let alone coaches.
Right? Like, all right, let's toss him in there. So overall, Mike, I think I like this movie a lot. Like I'm gonna overrate it, I think, but I gave it an 8.5 out of 10 for myself, just because it really showed a lot about basketball. I think it should be a little bit lower, just because of some of the love scenes are a little funky. Some of the shooting and like passing scenes didn't look like it wasn't that realistic to me to see have a guy 4 passes then everyone just like freeze and stiff. You know what I mean? It didn't look fluid at first. So there were a few things that I felt like maybe should have held it back a little bit more. But I feel overall just how good of a movie it was, how well it was written, how it was based off a believable coach character, right, and Bobby Knight. And they had a lot of things. They had these guys practice the film. They had practiced the way that they played 1950s basketball, studied film for that. They pulled players from Indiana. They really showed us the Midwestern love for basketball. And, as we see Milwaukee have one of the chances to be a non-coastal team winning a championship this year, it's definitely fun to see, the heartland of America, so they call it. When you see these guys with not, the big old flashy lights all over the place, the underdog story is a lot of fun to root for. And so often in this day and age, the underdog story doesn't seem to be a bunch of white guys from the middle of country farm area. But Hoosiers does a great job of showing us that anybody, any character, any color can be an underdog, and just you could fall for a story, and you can get behind a movie when it's done properly and it's believable through the characters. And for me, especially with Shooter, I think I would rate the movie a little lower, but Shooter just did such a great job that he shot the score up in my mind.
And I agree. So what I kind of want to do is do a two-parter. I'm throwing this at you right now.
Absolutely.
But this is what I was thinking. Okay, we do a overall score of the movie, and then we do a realistically score of the movie.
Oh yeah.
And so if you would give out of 10 your realistically sports score, what would it be?
The realistically sports score, I would go. I mean, honestly, I thought it was an 8. I would dock it a few points just for the kind of stiff passing, or sometimes in the movie it seemed they got lazy. I know it's a time crunch, but they wouldn't do the 4 passes. Like a lot towards the end of the movie, it would just be like 1 pass and shot. So I get that they're probably skipping the other 3 passes and the other time dwindling down, but I felt like that was a little bit kind of rushed the athletic aspect of the game and kind of rushed the attention to detail, which actually leads to championships. So I'm such a nerd that I look for little tiny things like that. I did think it was really funny when they had Ollie, when they announced them, right? And Ollie goes to shoot the layup and he gets blocked by the bottom of the rim, right? At the rally, whatever, at school. So I thought that was really realistic because, myself when I was shorter and I played basketball with some shorter, buddies, and they'll sometimes just get blocked by the bottom of the rim. You're like, man, that's where it is.
6 man.
Right, exactly. 6 man right there. But like I said, I think it's very obvious to see that these players practiced the 1950 style. They really got into it. They learned how to adjust their body, their defensive style. So that for me brings it up a little bit higher to that 8, like I said. I definitely. What about you? I mean, it's tough, right? Because I like that, and I'm not as nerdy in basketball as I am in baseball. So perhaps I'm much tougher on baseball movies, kind of like on 42, like how choppy the base running was. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah. So what did you think of this of the Hoosiers cast and their playing?
Yeah, I completely agree with everything you said. I think that you could really see the athleticism in these actors. They were definitely ball players. So you could see that shining through. I think a lot of the montages were sort of repetitive. So you don't really get to see like a full glimpse of actuality of like you were saying, even though that 4 passes kind of thing doesn't really, shine through, but we also don't see them pass, shoot. You see very close up to Jimmy Chitwood and his hand, and I thought Jimmy Chitwood had great form shooting the ball. So I think it was pretty realistically overall. I just wish you saw bigger, more of it, the way the game is really played instead of close up tight situation. So I would agree with you. I think it was an 8. As far as the fun meter, since we're sports, movies, and fun, overall fun meter, I would say it's I would give Hoosiers an 8.5.
Yeah, and I'm around that same area. It's definitely like the galvanizing music, right? They have the whole town behind it. Definitely gets you up and going. And there's only so much, for a rated PG movie, it has to still be kid friendly and it can't be too crazy. So I thought they did a good job as well of making it, age appropriate and very everybody friendly and an easy movie to watch with your family or watch with people of all types of different generations. Right. And still have a fun time, like you said, because some of these movies can get a little too down or a little too slow or boring. Whereas, you want to make sure these movies are keeping a captivated audience. And I think that's a reason why they probably cut out an extra hour or so of the film, right? Because they were like, okay, there's no way. Like, we have them for about 2 hours, but if we try to hold their attention for 3 hours, sometimes, even The Godfather, as great of a movie as it is, like, I can't sit through the whole Godfather without, breaking it up, having lunch, using the restroom, going outside, remembering where I am.
Yeah, exactly.
Coming to in the world, oh, hello, world. There we are. Sorry, I was watching the Godfather trilogy. My bad.
Sun's out. Oh, okay. Totally. Oh, my God, I do that through just one of them, let alone a trilogy. It's insane. And I think you touched on it well. It is suspenseful. I thought the cinematography is great. I mean, it's kind of hard not to be great when you're taking the fall of Indiana and, anything Midwest or Eastern Coast. You get all the great colors, but definitely. Now, as far as next week, I think we'll see what we come up with. I think it's next week. I need to deliver the 3 movies. So everybody, hit like, subscribe, share this thing, because that's the only way we're going to get to the masses is if you share, hit like, and subscribe. Neiko, thank you very much for joining me on this. I'm loving it. I'm loving the movies that we're doing. We'll see next week what we do. So have a great Sunday. Have a great rest of your week.
Yes, sir. You too, partner. Had a blast. Thanks, man.
Thank you. Take care, man.
All right, see ya.
Bye-bye.